Hey, Buru, Iboya, Ibuche, everybody in Cyberland. Your favorite Babalao, at least I hope so. Omodum, Ondileke coming at you with another great live, but particularly a live so that we can complete the Woody series of things, no different than what we spoke about before, because I think it's time for us to move on. Right. So like I've said before, please, if you guys haven't done so, please hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the share, and let's get after some of this deep learning. Because I think more particularly, this is truly what we need in our community. And you guys heard me say this 100 times over. Like at the end of the day, our community can use as much as information as it can get in order to truly bring I want to say the community together in order to bring the culture and the tradition together in order to kind of combat something that, unfortunately, I feel that we find ourselves in this place where there's a lot of just influencers. There's a lot of people that are giving misinformation. There's a lot of people that don't say this particular line, which is probably the most important. I am one perspective. I am not law. I am not the governing law of Ifa. Your spiritual leaders are, right? Those Bawalaos that are leading you are. And if you're crowned in Ocha, it's going to be those spiritual leaders in Ocha that are guiding you in Ocha. So although I may be knowledgeable in Orisha, I may be knowledgeable in Delegun, I may be knowledgeable in Odu Ifa, different perspective, different lineages, different taboos, different restrictions, different cosmic order, and different iles is something that we have to always remember. Is something that we're always going to be in. So just wanted to make sure that we all are on the same page. All right. With that said, I think it's about that time. Let's get after it. Let's get after it. Okay. So Nooney and Buddha Boy, it's late, Baba. Why you not asleep? Why you want me to go to sleep for? There's no need to go to sleep. I eat and breathe Ifa. Even at 2 a.m. my time, which is probably 3 a.m. for my East Coast people. But hey, at the end of the day, this is who we are. This is where we're at. But hey, we left off in Iwori Osa. Okay. So I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about Iwori Osa when it's all said and done. Iwori Osa has a core theme, right? If you guys are tracking, and if you guys have not looked at part one and part two, please do so that you can better understand the Iwori series of things. Because I had to really understand Iwori, right? In order, or I had to explain Iwori in order for you to kind of see how everything else comes to play. So let's just jump right in. Iwori Osa. Iwori Osa, one of the core warnings in Iwori Osa, if you have this sign in Awofaka, Ikofa, if you have this sign in as a Babalao, these are things that I need you to understand. This is a sign that says that you have to be careful about people coming to you, right, with gossip, with slander, with envy, right? These are particular signs that say don't allow people to drag you into those conversations, but more particularly, you cannot be part of those conversations. You cannot even initiate those conversations. That would be even worse, right? Because this is a particular sign that emphasizes in the vigilance and the self-protection, meaning that sometimes people are going to lure you into situations, right? Not just the gossip, the slander, the envy, but people are going to lure you into situations so they can kind of see where you're at. And then they're going to use it against you. And that's something you got to be careful with the Iwori Bosa. That's the reason why we talk about Iwori Bosa so often. And we warn that, hey, hidden truths will always emerge, right? So those skeletons in your closet, that's what's going to come to the light. So in a Woody Bosai, you have to be very confident that what you're doing is ethical, moral, and legal, because that's going to be important. But more importantly, a Woody Osai, kind of like a defensive strategy of things, advises protecting your personal space and your energy. That means in Iwori Bosa, it's important for us to kind of mount those incho signs. It's important for us to spiritually reinforce this person. In particular, there's a pataki that lives in this Odu. It's a merchant, and it talks about a merchant that was plagued by theft, right? Protected his store by performing a bo with certain secret ingredients. You're not gonna get me on those, but because he was able to do the ebo, because he was able to protect his store, this is a reason why you have to be able to protect your investments in Iwuri Bosa. Now, Iwuri Bosa is even bigger than that. Iwuri Osa is even bigger than that, and that's something I want to make sure you understand. Iwuri Bosa talks a lot about when the departure of humans, right, back to Olorun. When we talk about the start of reincarnation, right, this is an Odu that at the end of the day, it speaks very heavy with Ogun, Chango, Yansa, Uzoya, Ochosi, Ochun, Iku is even in this sign, and it speaks very, very, very heavy because this is a particular sign where people want to set traps, right? Set traps for mice so the cats can eat them, right? And this is the reason why, metaphorically speaking, we have to be careful that we do not fall into those traps, right? And this particular sign is the reason why sometimes we sacrifice mice to Eshu. This is the sign in Woody Bosa, right? But this is not something that anybody can do. Not even, I wouldn't even recommend a novice Babalao do it. That it has to be a particular ceremony that has to be done a specific way, okay? And not only does Eshu, but even on sign, because this is a sign, no kidding, this is a very strong sign where the person has to begin to change the way they live. When Iwuri Bosa comes out, Ifa's already warning you, hey, we need to start to maneuver some of the things that we're doing in life. We have to go over and receive Olokun and see what Olokun needs to say to us. We need to not only receive Olokun, but we need to ensure that we understand what Yemaya is saying to us. So what does that mean? How are you going to hear what Yemaya is saying to you other than you're probably going to have to go get crowned? You're going to have to figure out your path to the priest or priestesshood of Ocha, right? But more importantly, understanding that you have to receive Olokun before you get crowned because those are the rules set in Iwuri Bosa. Iwuri Bosa is a sign where Orisha Oku is also very prevalent here, and we have to be able to receive Orisha Oku. We got to be able to hear from Orisha Oku, right? But more particularly, I favor Orisha Oku in this particular sign more in Ifa than I do in Ocha. Olokun and Ocha in this particular case, okay, I get it. But you're going to have to get Olokun later on of Ifa, probably a little sooner than later. But Orisha Oku, I want you to get Ifa first, and then if you wanted to get it in Ocha, go get it in Ocha. Perfectly fine. But the power and what and how we mount that Orisha Oku in Ifa is what you're gonna need in Iwuri Bosa. Don't take my word for it. Talk to your elders, get it squared away, and you got it. Hey, little boy Abu Cheche, DJ Genesis Detroit. What's going on, brother? You a bad man. I respect it. Takes strength and discipline. Hey, I gotta do what I gotta do. I gotta do what I gotta do. Alafia Frazier, it's good to see you on there. All right. So now let's talk about Iwuri Boka. Iwuri Boka. Okay, what do we know about Iwuri Boka? So Iwuri Boka, I want to say you talk about the emphasis of breaking curses, avoiding traps, and overcoming manipulation. However, right, this is a sign that begins to tell us in Iwuri Ika that we have to make sure that our guidance is received, and we have to be able to ensure that we're always pushing forward hard because in Iwuri Ika, our greatest rewards come from hardships. Iwuri Ika is a sign that already tells you, listen, you're going to need some flexibility in your life. You're going to need to be able to be the person that sees the silver lining. You're going to be the person that needs to be able to reinforce their self-esteem and say, hey, listen, it's gonna be okay. And there's a bigger plan in play. That is Iwori Ika, right? So then when we start to kind of look at it from that perspective, you say, damn, that's crazy. But when you begin to align yourself and you have that destined alignment in Iwori Ika, imagine a person that's able to overcome manipulation, avoid traps, and more importantly, break curses. That's the key. Particular pataki here in this particular Odun, we talk about where a person goes to Orunmila because they feel that they're or they are a victim of spiritual attacks. And they found peace after offering the right sacrifices to Eshu and creating a protective charm through an Incheo sign. So what is the key there? What is the key? Keep your Eshu entertained, feed him accordingly. Don't be skipping out on his meals anytime you're going to do anything spiritually. And get yourself an inchel sign because that is going to be necessary in your life. Atiwuri boka. Okay. So now in Iwuri boka, something else I want you guys to know. And for those of you who are logging in and typing in the chat, throw your questions in there because we're flying through these. That means we're going to take a little bit of time for Q&A. Now is your time. So since I opened up at 2 a.m. Central Standard Time, that means there ain't that many questions out there. So you might as well throw all your questions out there now. But anyway, Iwuri Boka, let's continue. Iwuri Boka, here's something that I worry about because we talk about the traps and we talk about hardships. We also understand that Iwuri Boka is a sign where I worry about your relationships, specifically your marriages. I worry about adultery. I worry about people, stepping outside of their relationships. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but I'm merely saying I worry about it. So what do you need to do? You need to reinforce those relationships that you have, those intimate relationships. If you cherish it, make sure the other person understands it. Make sure that you guys are, a unit, right? And you guys are working that way. In a Woody Boka, okay? This is where a sign that says you live by the sword and you die by the sword. That's the proverb, right? So what does that mean? That means that sometimes you're going to be arrogant. Sometimes you're going to be impulsive. Sometimes you're not even going to understand that you are just coming out too strong. You're going to be misunderstood. You're going to miscommunicate. You have to be able to reflect in this sign and take a step back when things are happening and truly understand what you're saying, how you're getting there. Okay. The other thing that is said in this sign constantly by elders is curiosity killed the cat. You all heard that one. You all heard that one. So then what does that mean to you? That means, hey, be careful about these rocks you want to, turn over. Be careful about these things you're trying to figure out. Sometimes it's not your place to figure it out. Sometimes you need to just be comfortable saying, hey, I'm letting go. This is not working out. I don't care about the details per se, and it's time to go. Right? Because I mentioned the intimate partner in this sign, I feel like it's my obligation to say this. So if your intimate partner happens to be a person that cheats on you, and now you want to understand why did they cheat on me? Who did they cheat on me with? What is going those questions, that's the curiosity that killed the cat. You got more important things to worry about, like your alignment, so that you can be the better person later on, and you can be the stronger person, and you can align yourself with destiny, and you will find the right one. So you got to be careful with that. In particular, in this particular odun, something that I always talk about is um we gotta be careful. We gotta be careful, right? With how we mistreat those partners. Something that worries me in this odun is domestic violence. I worry about someone putting their hands on the other person. And that's something that we gotta be careful about. In addition, this is a sign that says that the person, right, is going to visit, a place of great danger. right? And a person needs to be careful and prepared not to kind of entice fate so that you don't lose your life. And you got to be careful about taking those risky opportunities. Be careful with taking those risky kind of sporting events, even, right? Be careful about going from 0 to 100 because somebody upset you. And now you take a gun out. Now you take a knife out. Now you're putting hands on somebody. Now you got the cops called on you. You got to be careful not to be impulsive in this Odu. Bottom line. Now, now you understand. So anyway, in this particular Odu, we give Mafarafun, Olofin, Ochun, Ochanla are big on this sign. Okay. Now, what else do we know about this sign? What else do we know? Um, I think I'm ready to move on. Let me make sure I ain't got nothing in the chat. Iwori came up, so I get what you're saying about Olokun. That makes sense because he can communicate with you heavy. Oh yeah, Buruboya. Nuni, one of the biggest things about when we talk about Olokun, Olokun and Ifa, okay, you get an actual Ida with Inguines that is pulled, no different than how you received your hand of Ifa, where you had Inkings and they were pulled. In Olokun, you're going to have the same process occur to you again. So you have a full Ida, 3 signs, prophecy, a bull, and you're walking in front of your health, your prosperity, you got clarity, and you're complementing that with your hand of Ifa, and you get a full range of options, a good full range picture, so that a local can now guide you forward. That's a local of Ifa. That's why a local of Ifa is so important. That's why a lot of times it's a little bit harder of a consecration than in a local of Ocha. A local of Ocha is still important, still aligns you, still does what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't necessarily give you an ita so that you can maneuver the way you need to maneuver it. No, it gives you guidance and what we call consejo in Ocha, right? And then boom, you got some alignment, you got your olokun, and life is great. But in signs that have heavy olokun, the heavy olokuns mean go get it in ifa, right? No offense to Ocha, and Ocha is doing everything right. I don't want anybody to get it twisted with me. Okay, now we are going to move on to Iwori Otrupon. Iwori Otrupon. What are we gonna say about Iwori Batutu? What are we gonna say? So in Iwuri Batutu, I think one of the biggest things that I always like to tell people is that this is the reason. Iwuri Batutu is the reason why when we feed Orunmila 2 hens. We feed Orunmila 2 hens. This is a sign that dictates and tells us why that's important. Because as the disciples of Orunmila are the 16 Mejis, the Mejis mean two. The 2 hens is what's important. This is something that we always got to remember. Right? This is not a secret, but this is something where everybody needs to understand that. Iwuri Batutu is a sign where I always worry about people falling outside of grace with Orunmila because they don't follow their ita, they don't get their consultations, they may get the consultations but don't do their bulls, right? And you start to kind of see where these things start to kind of come out. And Iwuri Batutu is a sign that says, well, as long as you're feeding Orunmila, the 2 hands, as long as you are following your ita and the consultations and you're looking at your guidance, that everything beautiful will work out for you. Everything will line itself up, right? Iwuri Batutu is one of those signs that talk about, hey, look, you're gonna have a leaky roof, you're gonna have some leaky money, you're gonna have some leaky situations. Leaky times 3, right? That's what the elders grew up telling us, right? And a lot of it had to do with we had to be careful about obligations, right? We have to make sure that when we help each other in the spiritual community, when you have this Odu, it's important that you help Don't be selfish. Might be selfless in this case. In this particular Odu, this is a sign where we have to study Ifa. This is an Odu that if you do it right? If you do it right and you're a Babalao, you're gonna collect what we call the uva de caleta, right? And we're gonna take 256 uva de caletas and we're gonna string them up like an eleque. And then we're gonna do something special with it. Now, even if you're an aleyu and you can get your godfather to do it for you, right? Even though this is your pack, man, that's gonna be bow, $1,000,000. That right there is an ebo for the ages. Iwori Batutu, right? Iwori Batutu is one of those signs that we gotta be careful who we fall in love with. Because Iwori Batutu is an emotional sign, and the person wants to fall in love right away. And the person falls in love right away because of the intimate nature in the bed, the lust, right? They got a taste, they like the taste, and to the point where now they're lustful and they want it, right? And you got to be careful. Fall in love for the right reasons, right? Fall in love for the right reasons. That's all I got for you there. In this particular sign, right? This is an Odun where for women, I worry about fibroids. I worry about making sure you do your womanly checkups, right? Making sure that we're looking for lumps, etc. Making sure the ovaries are good. That's all going to be good things for us to understand as we go through the Oduns, right? In this particular Odun, right? That's important. All right. What else can I say about this Odun? What else can I say? You know what? In Iwori Batutu, something else I think I would mention is this is a sign that encourages patience and wisdom. This is a sign that advises humility in order to gain blessings, right? There's a pataki here where a man was warned of deceit, right? He performed the ebo, right? And this ebo, it was in order to safeguard prosperity, right? And the reason why I tell you this is because, there's a study plan that I'm working on to show people how to interpret, patakís and the metaphors and how to properly use that going forward. This is something that's particularly important because in this sign, you got to make sure that you are protecting your prosperity, making sure that you understand that not all money is good money, but the money that you have, you got to invest it wisely in the things that you need, not the things that you want. All right. And I think I'll leave you on that. Right. Again, guys, I'm flying through these. I only got three, four more left. I'm about to go into Iwori Odu. Okay, so that means if you got questions, you need to start asking me questions. Iwori Torale. Yeah, let's talk about it. All right. Iwori Torale is one of these signs and I see your question in there, Lord Chinks. I got you, brother. I'm gonna read all these questions in a minute, right after I get done with these, right? So I'm gonna roll through these real quick, and then I'm gonna get to the Q&A section. And since you guys are probably the only ones that are up this morning, let me see how many viewers I got. Oh man, I only got like a handful of people on right now. So you guys are good. Ask your questions. Get it in. Get it in. All right. So, Iwori Otura. Iwori Otura or Iwori Torale is one of these signs. I like this sign. This sign talks a lot about the story, but this particular story, we have a different version of it in Yoruba. And maybe I need to post this pataki in my community tab on YouTube. But nonetheless, Iwori Torale talks about the story of David and Goliath. Right? But here's the thing. In this particular story, David is not David. Right? David is Chango. Right? Goliath is Goliath, right? Just a big giant. But the reason why I tell you this is because this is where Chango, right, took out the adversary that was bigger, stronger than him, right? And he made a slingshot. right? This is a sign where, their little sling is what they used to use to hunt, right? And they used to fling and the rock will come out. This is something, if you are crowned in Ochan, you have Chango, and you have this Odung and Ifa, I tell you now, get that consecrated, get it fed, put it with your Chango, super necessary to reinforce you. If you don't, right? If you don't, you're gonna take one of those and you're gonna put it to your Eshu so the Eshu can take care of you. You can actually put it with your Orunmila too, but nonetheless, you want to make sure that that is fed together with the divinity you're gonna leave it with, Eshu or Orunmila. Okay. Now, the other piece of this that I want you guys to focus on is that, in Iwori Torale, this is a sign that basically tells you got to mind your business. You got to mind your business. And you heard me say this earlier too when I said, hey, curiosity will kill the cat. So I need you to be very careful here because in this sign, the person that sticks their foot in the door that doesn't belong to them, or the person, yeah, that's basically what the elders used to say. The person that puts the foot in the door, right, that doesn't belong to them loses the foot. You gotta remember, I'm trying to translate Spanish parables, right, or Spanish proverbs to a certain point, and I gotta turn it to English. But that's pretty much and you get the gist of it, right? So it tells us to watch our step. Tells us to watch our step. This particular Odun has great losses because the person can be very impulsive. So if you had this sign in Awafaka, Ikofa, Babalao, it doesn't matter. You got to be careful about being impulsive. You got to make sure that at the end of the day, right, you got to not necessarily allow yourself to investigate things to the point where things that don't pertain to you, right? You just don't do it. That's the best thing I've got for you. Just don't do it. All right. The other thing I would tell you that all things that you do have to be consulted with Ifa. All your major life, and this goes for everybody. If you got major life moves, I'm getting married, I'm buying a house, I'm buying a car, I'm changing jobs, I'm moving to a different state or a different country, you should really talk to Ifa and see where you're going. In this particular Odun, I mean, it tells us that, this is something that we just have to do, right? All things have to be consulted with Ifa all the time so you don't have losses because Ifa's word will never touch the ground, right? Children in this particular sign bring happiness. This is a good sign where we do an ebo with Eshu, right? We put our Eshu together, we put a pinata together, and we try to build that happiness, right? But more importantly, that is also to break any type of osobos that might be on top of us. Keeping the children happy, pinatas, parties, whatever, and making sure that Eshu is involved with those things is a beautiful tribute, but also has a powerful ebo to it. This is a sign where we got to take care of our spouses. In this particular Odung, it's very, very important that you honor your spouse. Make sure that you appreciate your spouse. Make sure that you do those things to keep that flame going. In this particular sign, the person needs to open up their eyes more. A lot of times they're sleeping. And when I say they're sleeping, it's because they're going through the motions of life and they need to be able to open up their eyes and understand where life is taking them, where they're going, and how they're getting there. Owuri Otura or Owuri Torale, do not get me wrong. You align yourself. You represent an enlightenment that nobody can ever take away from you. This is spiritual clarity. This is a sign that encourages that wisdom, right? Through education and mentorship is important. In this particular sign, a student excelled after following Orumila's instructions to offer the right iyebale, right, to the person's head to Ochun, which means that, this is a tremendous ebo. It's giving iyebale to Ochun from your head down. Talk to your elders, get it done, because that's a really good thing. Okay? Now we're going to go into Iwori Irete. All right, now when we go into Iwori Irete, something I want to kind of make sure you understand. This is a very critical sign. Iwori Rote, Iwori Irete, however way you want to say it. This is an Odun where We talk about the change of the four seasons. We talk about where things are going to change, right? No different than the four seasons. You cannot maintain status quo because then you start to break that cycle that is important, not only in nature, but also important for your life. This is an Odun, right? Where Ochun, Chango, and Obatala, right, are strongly represented here. Because Iwori is the custodian of the Opun Ifa, the wooden tablet. But Iwori, okay, is a sign of great intelligence, great potential. But hey, even Iwori is going to find truly quickly that they're going to fail if they don't humble themselves or if they don't have the respect or they don't honor the Egunguns. And by honoring the Egunguns is honoring the elders that are alive. Because in Iwurirete, that is how you begin to change and shift the sign for your benefit. So that when we say the person's intelligent and has potential, we mean it. When we say the person understands what Opungifa is, they understand it because that was what gave you your destiny. And who sat behind that Opungifa was a Babalao, well, who was an elder. And those are the things that we always got to remember because it comes full circle. That's why Woody Irete is very, very interesting that the four seasons is also the four columns that represent your Osun, that also represent your Osun is part of your Leri. And if you don't align yourself, huh, only tragedy can come. And sometimes you got to let these people do what they do. But more importantly, if you're a Babalao and you have the sign, you got to reinforce yourself with Ododua pretty quickly. You got to reinforce yourself with Babalua pretty quickly. If you are an Aleyo, you got to make sure that you do the above Wurirote when it's called for almost immediately so that you can avoid any tragedy. Iwori is a sign that the person is gonna have to go get crowned. Because like I told you earlier, we talk about Obatala, we talk about Ochun, we talk about Chango. So Obatala, Ochun, Chango, heavily represented here, meaning that you have to align with them, and by aligning with them is going to go to Ocha. Okay. Now, when we talk about, Iwori guess what? Iwuri is a sign of the internal parasite. And the internal parasite comes in two ways, physical and spiritual, right? Where the eguns begin to manipulate and they begin to kind of really affect you in a couple of ways. They can mess with you mentally, but a lot of times they mess with you physically, right? That's the spiritual side of the house, where they begin to torment your mind, and you got to be careful about that. The other thing about Iwuri that you got to be careful is the parasite of the physical side, which is going to be the illnesses that come. This is a main reason why it's important that if you want to be successful with this Odun, you got to follow both spiritual prescriptions, physical prescriptions, come back around. When those things start to highlight, do your eboses, and boom. Now you're going to start to walk the walk. You have to listen to your Ita. This is an Odun that, no kidding, when I talk about the illnesses, right? This is a sign that talks about the three illnesses and the three prosperities. If you were able to forecast and you're able to understand what is going to ache you, both spiritually and physically, follow your Ita, learn these roads, boom, you get to the three prosperities even faster. Bah, and you're there. And that's the goal, right? Is that not the goal? The other thing I would tell you that in this particular sign, enemies don't face you, right? Face to face. They work underground. They begin to work you through different avenues. More particularly, they begin to get to you spiritually, and you don't even know it. Another reason why in the Woody Irete is important that you're constantly reinforcing yourself spiritually through consecrations. Again, you got to go get crowned. You got to feed the four winds, which that's something that Babalawo has to do for you. You got to receive Babaluaye. And most likely, you got to do a paraldo because Iwurirete carries with it Egun Burukus. And a lot of times, that's what Ifa is already directing us. But more importantly, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even in your Ita, but that would probably come to pass. So you got to kind of monitor that. Iwuriirete is a sign that tells us a lot about the elder man kills the young wife when she tries to leave him, right? Which means that you're going to have problems with your relationship. And you cannot allow that to be the defining moment in your life. Careful what you do with your spouse. Okay, don't beat her, don't kill her, don't do nothing. Hey, listen, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. At least you tried, and then you're gonna have to go find somebody else, and that's the bottom line. All right? So don't take it to the heart. This is a sign that I will leave you guys with this one before I jump to my last two oduns. You need to do a spiritual misa. You need to do an investigative misa, not once, but probably a bunch of times. And the reason why a bunch of times kind of aligns itself with why we do it in Ocha, probably around 5 times, right? And then you're gonna do a coronation, right? A coronation misa, so that we can get you squared away there, and we can align you with your spirit guide. Done. All right. All right. You guys are ready for the next one? You guys are ready for the next one? Hey, little boy, Bucheche Janae, how you doing? Good morning. Yeah, I know, Janae. It's early in the morning. I don't know, hey, here I am, E-fine it up. All right. Hey, now let's go into Iwori Boshe. Iwori Oche. Oh man, what can I say about this? Iwori Boshe is a good sign for ambition, right? But you guys all heard it before, right? Ambition is good when it's vectored properly. Ambition is good, right? When it's healthy, right? When it follows ethical, moral, legal laws. Those things are all good, and I love those things. But ambition that takes a turn and begins to violate some of those ethics, morals, and legalities of things, oh boy, the downfall that you have coming your way. Okay, this is an Odun, right? This is an Odun where we have to give thanks to Olorun, right? The so-called heavens, but I don't like calling it a heaven because the name is Olorun, okay? So we want to be careful with that. Iwuri Boche is a sign that talks about that, don't leave, don't leave the kind of the lingering concepts of things, right? Don't start something if you're not willing to finish, right? Don't doubt yourself if you're gonna start a project. You have to get after it. There's no halving anything in this Odun. You got to get after it. In this particular sign, you got to work the eguns, right? You got to work the eguns, particularly if you have your parents that have passed away. Right? If your parents passed away, if your dad passed away, give a white rooster to Orun or your teja, for your dad. Or if your mom passed away, you give a white hen to mom, right? For the sake of this Odun, for the sake of ensuring that they connect with you so that they can save you, right? You got to be careful in this sign. You got to be careful because the elders need to protect us, and we give our parents those animals for the sake of, if they're passed away, you give them so that they can begin to protect their child. The other thing that this Odun tells you is that we have to protect our child. You got to be careful who you leave your children with. You got to be careful with, if you leave them in them daycares, is the daycare mistreating them? If you got a babysitter, is the babysitter mistreating them? If you're leaving them with anybody, you got to be careful that you monitor your children carefully. Doesn't matter who you leave them with. This is an Odun. Again, that I want you to make sure that you understand your children, you understand your ambitions. But more importantly, I want you to make sure that we take care of ourselves physically, because in this Odun, we talk about problems with the feet, problems with the legs, right? Iwori boche, right? We got to be careful about climbing high ladders. We got to be careful about running too hard, and then you twist an ankle, you break a leg, something like that. You fall off of something. So be careful with high places. In this particular Odun, this is the person can sometimes find themselves imprisoned through emotion. I love something too much. I want to help somebody that I love. I want to put myself in a deficit so I can help somebody else. You got to go to Ochun. If you got a big heart, go to Ochun. Give Ochun your problems. Tell Ochun, listen, harden me up a little bit. You're going to take a metal heart and you're going to go ahead and put it inside your Ogun, right? And you're going to tell your godparents, right, that you need to consecrate a heart or feed a heart with Ogun so that we can harden you up a little bit. Because sometimes we get a little soft here. And we got to be careful about that because that'll be your downfall. Right? Here is a sign, particularly for my women. Here is a sign where women fall in love, right, with themselves. They become super conceited. They become super kind of superficial. Right? So we got to be careful with this Odun, ladies. Right? We got to be careful. All right. So in this particular sign, we understand. And boy, good morning, Fred. Good morning. We gotta be careful in this Odun that we don't resemble the plátano, the plantain, right? Very beautiful on the outside, but when you look on the inside, all the worms are coming out. Very hard to tell when they go spoiled. And that's what this Odun talks about. And that's where ambition can get you. This is where your feelings, you're too much in your feelings can get you. This is where, hey, I'm not taking care of my physical body and I'm allowing my legs to walk without thinking and using my head. That's the reason I told you to watch your legs. Right? You got to be careful with those things. Give your parents the animals that they need if they passed away, and make sure that Ochun gets what she needs, and that's going to begin to your alignment for sure. Okay? Iwori Oche. The last thing I'll say about Iwori Oche, this is a sign that enhances creative power and communication skills. Those are going to be your strengths in Iwori Oche. This is going to be where you need to kind of focus on those two concepts if you truly want to see a difference in your life, right? Because those are your strengths, that creative power, right? That communication. That is what we need from you. Now we go into Iwori Ofun. Last one, guys, and then I'm gonna go Q&A, and then we're gonna wrap this up. Iwori Ofun. What can I say about Iwori Ofun? Iwori Ofun is a sign that represents wisdom through discipline. If you're not disciplined, if you feel like you know it all, if you feel like you haven't taken the word I know out of your vocabulary, if you feel like you don't need a spiritual leader, if you feel like, hey, I got this and I don't need support from anyone, all these things should be warning signs to you right now as I am speaking to you. If you're a Babalao, even worse. If you're an Aleo, there's still time and we can help solidify some things for you. Doesn't matter who you are and you have this sign. This is an Odun where it encouraged the mastery of meditation and prayer. Right? Iwuri Bufun is one of these Oduns, right? That when we look at it, from a distance, this is an Odun that talks about the power of discord, where we understand that in our lives, we're going to see not everything is going to be flushed right. We're going to need to see things for what they are, and they're going to be ugly, but we're going to be able to work through it. And that's Iwori Bufun. That's the mentality you need in order for you to be successful. Iwori Bufun is a sign that talks a lot about the age of the dinosaurs. This is a sign that confirms that even the dinosaurs were here, but the dinosaurs ended, right? And it doesn't matter how you come to be or how come to the realization that dinosaurs came and dinosaurs died and how they got extinct and what happened. None of that is important. But what is important is that anybody can go instinct, which is why it's important for us to ensure that we understand where we're going and how we're getting there. The other big thing about Iwori Ofun is in order for you to understand where you're going, you got to understand your ita. In order for you to understand your ita, you got to have a good spiritual leader. In order for all that to work itself out, guess what happens? You have a fallout with your spiritual leader. So you have to be very confident who you're picking to be your spiritual leader. You got to be very confident and have communication skills in order to have those conversations with your spiritual leader. But more importantly, this is another Odu that talks about your children. Your children need to receive hand of Ifa. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. You need to understand how to navigate your children in Iwori Buffoon. That's just, I'm just telling you what I believe, one perspective in this world, one Bawalao's perspective. Okay, so then if I'm saying in Iwori Buffoon, your children have to get hand of Ifa, that means that your spouse or your intimate partner has to play ball here too. You guys are going to have to come in as a unit. This is a sign where we don't want to go instinct. We want to make sure that we are strong and we have a plan for the future and we got to get there. This is an Odun, right? Where you can't have bad sentiments. In Ori Buffoon, the person sometimes is tormented by thoughts or negativity, and you can never allow yourself to do that. You're too pure for this. You have so much greatness. This is a strong sign where we got to be careful about not being this is an unforgiving sign, unforgiving person. Iwori Buffoon, guess what? The person doesn't it's hard for them to forgive and forget. They're gonna have a hard time. So I'm telling you that if this is a sign that aligns with you, you're gonna have to find the deep at times to say, maybe I'm not gonna forgive because I'm an unforgiving person, but maybe it's time for me to maybe forget some things. Maybe it's time for me to understand that there is a partnership here, and it doesn't necessarily mean I have to be BFFs. And these are all things we got to think about in the Woody Buffoon. In a Woody Buffoon, this is a sign where there are three forms of lucks that are going to come your way. And Ifa says that you're going to get those lucks. But you have to be careful not to go down the road of doing something illegal or foolish that's going to get you wrapped up. That's a Woody Buffoon. Okay. So there you go. We have now wrapped it up. We have now spoken about every Odun under the Woody series of things. All right. So now, hopefully, you guys got something from this. Okay. Now, hopefully, you guys, at least now you can see that in my tabs, you can hit shop, and there's even Oduns that I write papers on. Right. If there's one that really, really excites you, right? Or if you have an Ecofa or Awofaka, I do those papers too, and that's also in the shop tab. So definitely look for those things. Find ways to connect. Find ways to align yourself, because again, that is the key. All right, let's get to questions. Let's get to questions. Rocio, long time. How are you, Iburo boy Abucheche? Good to see you on. Yeah, I know. I know. All right. What's our first question? What's our first question? Iwuri came up, so I get what you say about Olokun, Buruboya. Okay, then we got Owani Bosa, Omo Ochun. How does polygamy fall into Ifa within the Santos and into today's society and how people want to live their lives? A lot of the Santos cross between one another in patakís. Yeah, Lord, but here's the thing. Don't so Ifa is about time and space. Okay. Ifa is about time and space. So here's something that I want you to kind of understand. When we talk about time and space, not just because let's say Ochun was married to, let's say Ogun, and then Ochun was married to Chango. Then Ochun was married to, and this is why Ochun gets a bad rep, and I don't like the rep she gets. but it's all based on a metaphysical starting point in a certain lifetime or a life stream that begins to kind of announce that, hey, okay, this is what we're looking at, right? This is what we see. This is what the moral and the ethical lesson is, particularly in this case. So let's look at this and let's dissect this a little bit. And again, I'm not against, I'm not for, I'm just going to give you a couple of hints of information here. In Iwori Bosa, right, we understand that there was a pataki where Orunmila, sees the sign of Batala, it seeks clarity about, right? And it's about some form of disorder that's happening in the land of Obara Nilaye. Okay. So Orunmila explains that the land is cursed, it's filled with ambition, it's filled with unrest, it's filled with kind of, illnesses and stuff like that. And it begins to kind of see that, highlights a breakdown and kind of that social balance of things. So this Odu, as we discuss it and we look at the Iwori Ofun, we look at sacrifice and transformation. We look at the spiritual judge and the executioner of justice. We begin to kind of see a lot of different things that come out of this Pataki that begin to tell us that we need to be careful about the social order and the social balance of things. Here is where I'm going to dig a slightly deeper. Right? So, when we talk about the importance of spiritual and social structures, we talk a lot about relationships. So like polygamy, right? Are not judged solely by desire, but by whether they preserve the harmony or they're introducing chaos. So, and I think that's where we start to see where we're crossing streams, right? Because polygamous relationships, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. So if the social balance is the important part, are we doing our part to ensure that is playing itself out? In the sign of Otura Irosu, right? This is a sign where, where we begin to see the expression of polygamy. This is an Odun where this is where the Muslim, and I can't remember, it's Muslim, I think harams, I can't remember, so don't take my word for it, right? You asked me a question ad hoc, and I'm trying to spit this out for you. But this is where that concept was born. This is why you begin to see that in marriages in Islam we have multiple spouses, but only if we can maintain and give all the spouses equally the same amount of attention, prosperity, stability, right? And so there's a lot of rules to these things. Do good, don't look, don't look at whom is doing good, just be good, right? So there's a lot going on as I begin to kind of piece this back. So I don't know if I gave you clarity, Lord, right? I don't know if I gave you clarity, but polygamy, okay? Polygamy at the end of the day, and I'm looking this way, it's one of those things where you know Otura Hirosun talks about it. Owani Bosa talks about it. As long as we got spiritual balance, you should be okay. Ochun, spiritual and emotional, strategic balance, was the key with Ochun. So even though we start looking at examples like Ochun, we gotta make sure that we understand the diplomacy, the fertility, and the domain and how it plays itself out. Um, we gotta look at, just different concepts, right? When we talk about polygamy. And again, not because I'm against, it's not because I'm for, but you got to be careful. Because and I'll leave it with this. Polygamy is increasingly, right, seen through a lens of, consent, through agency communication. Ifa doesn't prohibit it. If that's what we're looking for, and that's the answer, that's what it truly is, right? It actually just demands that we have a spiritual and an ethical responsibility that we need to make sure that we are aligning ourselves with. Just like Owani Bosa, right? It empowered, right, Arofin, right, to act in the pataki justly, right? Modern practitioners, right, have to assess us today, 2025, have to assess our relationships, right, to maintain the ire, right? Or we force bringing osobo. So something to think about. Hopefully, I answered your question because I don't want you to think I'm tiptoeing. I think I gave you the answer. If I was not going to prohibit it, but it just wants you to have a social structure and understand that that you have alignment and that you'll probably be just fine. Okay. All right. What else did I got here? Little boy Bucheche, Baba, Boo, Fred, Janae, got you, Rocio, I got you, Papa. Baba, how would you get a Misa? Do you have to have your hand of Ifa to have it done? No, absolutely not. I was in Misas at the age of 12, 13, and I didn't have anything. So just to kind of give you some insight, you know what I mean? For you, Fred, particularly, you already know I got you on my group chat. You're inside the Ile. Talk to my wife. My wife will set you up with a spiritual Misa, because particularly we want to be careful and we want to make sure that we're vetting these spiritualists or these mediums, right, properly. Because the last thing I want is that you make that investment to get a spiritual misa and it's a fraud or it's somebody that we haven't tested and ran through the ringer. That is very important for us in this ile. And you'll get it and you'll get that love. Hit me up in the spiritual chat and my wife will hook you up, right? Oloyansa. Oh yeah, Yansa. All right, what else I got here? And then thanks took much work instead of betting and loving oneself. It does take a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, Rocio. All right. Gracias, Baba, para todo. Now, little boy, Lord, it is my pleasure. Okay, it is my pleasure. That's what I'm here for. Okay, guys, I am going to give it 20 seconds before I log off. Why? Because I know that my stream, this is the reason I keep looking this way and I keep looking this way, because my stream is on this way, right? Or actually, no, my stream is over here. My Zoom platform, which I am using that software to stream, is actually over here. So I can see myself and I know that it's about a 15-second, maybe a 10-second delay. So anyway, nonetheless, I'll give it just slightly a little bit of time before I log off. And with that, Iburu, Iboya, Ibuche, everybody in Cyberland, if everybody allow, at least I hope so. With Inspirational Sunday, finishing up Iwori series. Again, like, subscribe, share. And with that said, Iburu, Iboya, Ibuche.